For those of you who don't know me, my name is Azim, Dr. Azim Alam. I am a recent academic foundation program trainee at Guy's and St. Thomas's in London. It's been a few weeks since I've done a webinar. Shwaib has been holding the fort really, really well. As you can see, my hair has grown far too long. I don't know any barbers who can cut my hair. But it's so great to be back for this first in our series of how to get 10 publications. I think this is called the how-to series, where we kind of give you a whole bunch of different kind of golden tips and tricks on things which people really commonly want to do at medical school, whether that's publications, presentations, how to get the highest mark in your year, those kinds of things. So we are here to try and help you out with that today. We have, just before I introduce our special guest, just a few housekeeping announcements. We have the feedback form on the last slide as usual, where you guys can kind of get your certificates. So if you fill out that feedback form with all your details, then you will now get a certificate per webinar you attend for your portfolio. As I said, today we're going to be covering mainly how to get publications as well as kind of presentations at medical school. How things are going to work today is that Prof has very kindly allowed me to kind of give a 20-minute introduction to my story of how I got my publications at medical school, and kind of my journey towards that, and how he essentially changed my life and how exactly he did that as well. So yeah, this will be relevant to people in the UK and internationally as well. We have a few doctors in the chat as well if there are any pressing questions, but really I don't want to talk about publications per se for an hour, because that would be incredibly boring. So I want this to be super interactive, and the focus is going to be in the discussion at the end with Prof. Does that sound okay with it to everyone? Yeah? Okay, brilliant. So without further ado, I'm going to briefly introduce Professor Ma, who is our special guest for today. As I said, I will be kind of giving an overview of my story in research, and then he will lead a discussion and a Q&A at the end where we can all get involved and you can ask all of your questions, both to Professor and to myself as well. So a brief introduction to Prof. So Prof is a professor of anesthesia. He essentially is the reason why I got my 22 publications since the middle of medical school. I met Prof during my intercalated BSc at Imperial, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about his incredible work, one of the smartest and humblest men I know, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him as we approach the Q&A in a few slides. But yes, thank you once again, Prof, so much for being here with us today, and we're so grateful that you can impart your incredible knowledge onto so many people on this fantastic platform. So thank you for joining us. So let's dive right in. As I said, I want this to be interactive. The first thing I want to know is why there are 400 people here today on this sunny afternoon. So what I really want to know is what you aim to gain from the webinar today. So if you guys could go to menti.com and type in this code, essentially, if you could answer that question, there are probably going to be hundreds of responses on the screen. I'm not going to be able to read them all, but it will give me a better idea as to what you guys are aiming to get from today's webinar. So if you could, please go to that link, and it will really help me out as well, and probably help you guys out, because you can probably see that you're all in the same boat. So yeah, how to get into research, practical tips to get publications. Let's see if I can scroll. There we go. Benefits of being published. I'm not sure if it lets me scroll. Oh, here we go. Can I scroll down? The first time I've used this before. Nope. Okay, I think those are the ones I can see for now. But it looks like from here, the main things are going to be portfolio. Publications are daunting, seem impossible. How to get into research, how to get published, research, papers, to be like Azim, understandable. I'm joking. Efficient ways. Okay, so basically, you want to get published. You guys know or think anyway that it's incredibly difficult to get publications at medical school. And I guess the reason I'm here today and Prof is here today is to try and relieve those doubts and try and prove to you that actually it's a lot more straightforward than you guys potentially think it is. So yeah, help you stand out amongst medical students to get my 2 publication points. Okay, brilliant. So most of the things that I was expecting as well. And AFP tips, which we can talk about at the end as well. Brilliant, that was really useful. I think there's one other question for you guys, is everyone wants to get publications at medical school. And if this question comes up, which probably won't, knowing my luck. Try that out again. No, it's not going to come up. But essentially, the next question would have been why people want to get publications in the first place. I think a lot of people always say they want publications, but the actual reason behind that is a little bit unclear. I think one of the biggest mistakes when publishing anything is to just get publications just for the sake of getting publications. That shouldn't really be the reason anyone does research, because there is a lot of poor quality research out there. And really, publishing research should be to try and improve the knowledge base of the scientific community, whilst of course getting you those points on your application. So that's why we're here, and Prof will give us some fantastic insight a little bit later on. So a little bit about my story. I don't want to jabber on too much about myself, as much as I love that. There I am in utero, destined to be a doctor with my stethoscope and my lab coat. Following my neonatal doctoring period, I was born, there I am. And that's really the initial stages of my life. Following that were a few other bits and pieces that happened. So I did my MBBS at King's. I'm not even sure how many years ago I started that, but I graduated 2 years ago. I then, in my 4th year, did my intercalated BSc in surgery and anesthesia at Imperial, which is where I met Prof. And this was all kind of, when I finished all of that process, I then joined the academic foundation program in vascular surgery at Guy's and St. Thomas's. And right now I am doing an FY3, which is a fancy word for kind of locuming, trying to improve your portfolio, traveling pre-quarantine, and just doing things that you might not have had the time to do during F1, F2. So that's a brief summary of my story. Now, my story in terms of academia, I thought I'd break that down a little bit to you. There is a message behind this flowchart. So 1st to 3rd year, I had 0 publications. I met Prof during my intercalated BSc, where I also still had 0 publications at the beginning and end of that process. But the point is, when I met Prof, I had no real background in research. I'd never really written an academic paper in my life. And so, I mean, this entire period from a research point of view was very unproductive. So if you guys are kind of around this stage here and you have no papers, this is really to remind you not to worry too much, because I was in exactly the same boat, and all you really need to do is have initiative and ideally meet someone like Prof or someone equivalent who can really help you in that process and essentially become a research mentor for you. What happened here, things kind of then spiraled a little bit upwards on an upward trajectory, which was great. So then, I started doing my research during this intercalated BSc. And you can see there's a lag period of around a year from when you actually start doing research to actually getting publications. So as I said, the majority of these publications have been with Prof Ma, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, really the take-home message here is, it's never too early to get involved in research, regardless of the reason why you're getting involved in research. And also, it's a slow process. It can take time to really build up that portfolio of yours. So yeah, don't worry too much. And that's why we're here to help. Okay, so turns out I put the question on this slide. So another question for you is, why are you trying to obtain your publications? Fine. So own interest to become a professor, for the CV, for points on your application, portfolios, genuinely interested in research for the foundation program. Fine. So all the understandable reasons. Essentially, some people are genuinely interested in research, and some people kind of want to add those points to application, and others want to become professors. So yeah, all good reasons, and to open doors into things I want to do, worried that if not, I'll fall behind other people. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Really, really interesting. So I thought I'd focus on a few publications that I've done. There are a few take-home messages behind this slide, which I'll really make two main take-home messages here, which I will focus on. So this is a selection of a few papers that I've done. And I think you'll notice that if you look at the last name author on here, there's probably a trend you'll notice there. So that's one trend you'll probably notice, is the benefit of having a good mentor. And there's also another thing you'll notice from all of these publications. So other than the fact Prof Ma helped me with all of these, is there a trend that you guys can see across all of these papers here? Is there anything you notice about all of them? Exactly. So obviously I've done some primary research, but I thought I'd put this on this slide because I think the main reason people are here is because they want to get, you know, relatively straightforward but high yield and impactful publications. So that is this selection here that I decided to choose. So these are all reviews in this selection I've chosen. So that's one thing to bear in mind, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides, is what a review is, the different types of reviews, and how you can make kind of good reviews as well. So these are all narrative reviews, and I'll talk to you about what that is and how that differs from a systematic review as well. And there's one thing that you might notice, or a few things as well, that are actually different across all of these, and that is, you know, the actual variation in specialties here. So you've got 2 neurology, 2 renal, 2 pulmonary or lung related papers, 1 liver, 1 pediatrics, and 1 tumor, or, you know, malignancy related. So the reason I've done and shown you this is because the 2 points here, narrative reviews are great to do at medical school, and I'm going to talk about those shortly. And the second thing is you do not need to be an expert or a world-renowned researcher in any specific specialty to write a paper on it. A lot of these are in the realms of anesthesia because that's the department Prof works in, and that's the department I did a lot of my research in. But also you can see that the specialties are so varied that you don't need to be that world expert to write a paper on surgery, neuroinflammation, and cognitive impairment. In fact, I had very little understanding or knowledge about a lot of these areas. And just the process of starting writing these papers, you learn so much that you can really help out and contribute to the scientific community. So that's kind of the 2 take-home points here. Narrative reviews are great, and you don't need to be a world expert to write the paper. I see a lot of your questions here, and I'm hoping to answer a lot of those as we go along. So what are narrative reviews, which are kind of most of the publications that I've shown on the previous slide? Well, there are kind of 3 types of narrative review that you guys should probably be aware of. So you've got narrative overviews, commentaries, and then editorials, which are a little bit less relevant to you. So all the ones you saw on the previous slide are kind of narrative overviews. The purpose of any narrative review really is to objectively report the current literature on a topic in order to kind of give a new, fresh overview of what is available. So all of the papers on the previous slide, if you have the slides in front of you, are essentially that. It provides the reader with that kind of comprehensive overview and puts that information into perspective. But you can also give some of your novel thoughts and ideas. So kind of normally at the end of that narrative review, you would say, okay, here are my thoughts on what I think future research should be looking into. Here are my thoughts on novel therapies in terms of the area that I've just written about. So it's also really great to kind of have a little bit of that future perspective as well. So the reason why these are brilliant is because firstly, they're non-systematic, which means they are not the same as a systematic review. So narrative reviews are kind of traditional literature reviews in that you take the author's findings of the papers that you have included and write them out in a non-systematic way. That doesn't mean that you get all the information and write everything that you can possibly think of. It just means that you don't have that very strict inclusion, exclusion criteria, and you don't work through it in that systematic approach that you would use in a systematic review or a meta-analysis. So essentially, it's a lot more straightforward to write. It's very high yield, and there are also really, really interesting topics that you can write on as well. Systematic reviews require a good understanding of the actual process of writing these reviews systematically, as well as a lot of background in often statistics and how to create funnel plots if you're looking into meta-analyses and things like that. Whereas these are a lot more straightforward. The kind of caveat to these is that it is very, very easy to write a bad narrative review. And a lot of people kind of, especially in recent years, they don't necessarily frown on narrative reviews, but they frown on bad ones. And when I say bad, what I mean is that you take a selection of topics, or sorry, a selection of papers in the area that you've chosen, and just focus on a few papers and come to a conclusion. That is not going to be representative of the literature as a whole. So I'd recommend kind of reading a few articles on how to write good narrative reviews, and then just get started. I mean, if you have a mentor such as Prof Ma, then that's very, very beneficial. And I'll give you some tips on how to find your own mentor, and also. You can actually look at the literature available now. You can do literature searches yourself, but also I can show you a few tips on how to find exactly what to write and where to find those narrative reviews that you should be writing as well. So that's going to come up in a few slides. So here's an example of a narrative review that I wrote. Please don't read any of this. It's a lot of words and you probably won't find it massively interesting. But the point I'm going to prove here is that if you look at the introduction, page one is, well, sorry, chapter one, or the first introduction is page 548. The end of the paper is page 553. So once you condense this into a PDF, this whole review is only 5 pages long, which in the grand scheme of things is actually a very short paper, right? This was actually a very interesting paper to write, and thankfully it got published. But the point here is that you don't need to write papers which are 40, 50, or even 10 pages long. If you can condense the information well, and come up with your own titles and subtitles, and cover the literature in a meaningful way, you can write a published paper with a PubMed ID within just a few pages. So that's really the point I wanted to make here. So here's another example of a paper that Prof Ma and I did. The reason I put this one here is because this paper, I actually remember this quite clearly. I remember if anyone goes to King's have, and probably other universities, have things called SSCs, or Student Selected Components. It's essentially when the university forces you to write about a topic, and you hope that you write a reasonable essay, essentially to pass the SSC. So I wrote this as part of my SSC. I don't really think I had a choice on what to write about. They kind of just gave it to me. And I wrote about it. I didn't think it was anything miraculous or life-changing, but I thought I'd send it to Prof, and Prof essentially gave me a few tips and pointers on how he recommended to improve this SSC that I churned out. And within, I think, a couple of weeks after his advice, this paper was already undergoing the first revision process. So do not underestimate the papers that you write during medical school. A lot of them, well, a proportion of those will be publishable with a little bit of advice from people within that specialty. So that's really another take-home message, is don't neglect the papers that you've already written during medical school and put them to the side. because a lot of these papers will have publishing potential as well. And this, once again, is a narrative review. So I think this is my last example of a kind of narrative review. This is a commentary, actually. But this kind of comes under the umbrella of narrative reviews. The thing that really differs here is that often you're kind of providing your own particular opinion, and you're trying to encourage debate and provoke discussion within the scientific community, rather than just providing a summary of the literature, if that makes sense. So I wrote this with a very good friend of mine during medical school. And really the take-home point here is that he was I think we were probably in 4th year at the time. He had a big passion for global health. I knew nothing about global health. And he asked me to help him on this paper. And I guess we managed to get this published in the BMJ, and it was brilliant, brilliant experience. But really what the take-home message here is, writing papers with friends is a great way to write papers, particularly if you both have some element of research experience as well. These also will get you PubMed IDs, as well as a bunch of other types of papers as well, which we'll talk about. So he had an interest in global health. He found during the Zika virus global kind of issue that was going on a few years ago, he found that a discussion about global health security was really, really important, and universal health coverage. He then just decided to get me on board to write a commentary about it, and it got published. I think this was only 2 pages long. So if you have a passion about something, hopefully you're already reading the literature about that topic. I mean, if you are doing that, then you should be able to find areas that you could potentially write about. So obviously, there are going to be thousands of papers being written about coronavirus right now. If you can find an interesting approach, or even just provide a brief commentary on your thoughts or ideas behind a certain area within coronavirus, then that's probably going to get you a paper out of it with a little bit of tweaking and advice. So yeah, that's really the take-home message here. Writing with friends is great, and also people really can value your views and commentary even as a medical student. So moving a little bit on from narrative reviews, I thought I'd briefly touch on freedom of information and audits. I'm not going to get bogged down too much on this, but have you guys heard of kind of the Freedom of Information Act, or FOI requests before? Yeah? Okay, brilliant. So for those of you who don't know, essentially, as these 2 bullet points show, public authorities are obliged to publish certain information about what they do, but also members of the public, like you and I, are also entitled to request information about what these public organizations like the NHS are doing. So what that means is that if you have an area that you want to write about, you can essentially submit an FOI request to, say, an NHS trust or a healthcare authority, and say, okay, I want your data about X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to write a paper on it. And the fantastic thing about this is that legally, on a whole, they are obliged to provide you that information if you meet their criteria within 20 days. They have a 20-day working limit on the whole, which is great, because if you come up with an idea and you kind of know what information you need, you submit it, and hopefully within 20 days, you'll have all the information you need and you can write a paper about it. So, for example, I popped in this paper here, which I found quite interesting. It's about the diagnosis of prostate cancer. For those of you who don't know, like often traditionally, transrectal ultrasound and biopsy has been performed for diagnosis, but now NICE has moved towards multi-parametric MRI scans prior to your biopsy. So how that kind of came about is that this paper kind of contributed to the literature a lot, and all they did, these authors, is they submitted an FOI request about multi-parametric MRIs, how they're being performed, when they're being performed, and whether they're being performed prior to transrectal ultrasound and biopsy. They then put all that data together, and they came up with some interesting evidence behind MPMRI and transrectal ultrasound, which has now actually contributed to change in clinical practice as well. So that's essentially an example of that, but you can do that for loads of different topics. FOI requests about you know, UTIs, DVTs, those kinds of things, and you can write a paper about it. So that's what FOI is. It's really straightforward to do. And finally, audits. I'm sure all of you guys know about audits and quality improvement projects. These are kind of going to be your bread and butter from when you apply to your core training jobs. The NHS as a whole and health education in England are super big fans of quality improvement projects and audits now. And I'm going to give you a tip on how to figure out what audit you should do. Here are some bog standard examples which people always write about, and there will always be a need for audits like this. In brief, audit is essentially you're taking a gold standard institutional guideline or national guideline, and you're making sure whether trusts or on a national level those guidelines are being met. So here are a few examples, and then you can write a paper based on your findings whether that organization is being compliant with those guidelines. So yeah, a few examples for you there. And as I said, I'll give you a few tips on how to figure it out. And then I think there's probably my last broad area on how to get really quick and easy publications at medical school. So this is probably the quickest way and easiest way to get a publication at university. So letters to the editor. These will also get you PubMed IDs on the whole. I've included two here, 1 and 2, written by, co-authored by a good friend of mine, Dr. George Miller. He has churned out tons and tons of papers, and here are 2 of his letters to the editor. They don't count as original research, as someone mentioned here, but if you're looking for points on your applications, a lot of these will deliver PubMed IDs. So the both of these will get you PubMed IDs. So all a letter to the editor is that you are responding as a researcher or a clinician to a paper that has been written. So you're addressing, so here, this paper on the left, the author had read a paper about the value of mentorship in clinical practice. They said, okay, this paper hasn't quite focused on the value of mentorship in academic medicine. I'm going to write a 1-page letter talking about the value of mentorship in academic medicine. And they wrote it and they got it published. And then this one on the right is, he was involved in sexism in the dissection room paper. This was in response to another paper which was talking about how there's sexism within medical education as a whole and the healthcare system, and they wrote one specifically about the dissection room in response to that article. So really simple, really straightforward, and can be quite short as well. So that's if you're simply looking for points on your application, then this can help as well. So before we move on to our discussion, obviously you guys have tons of questions which I'm going to try and answer in that discussion, and Prof and I will both answer. Let's just talk about a few golden tips. So my #1 tip, obviously because I have worked with fantastic researchers such as Prof Ma, is to network. So what I would recommend really is that if you have an area that you are interested in terms of research, you should really reach out to researchers who are doing research in that area. So whichever university you're in particularly, if you can find researchers within that university and offer and say who you are and that you are willing to help out writing manuscripts in whatever capacity, then often they'll be very willing for you to help out in that process. So network, email. I'm not saying send out 1,000 emails, please don't do that, but send out a select few emails to the researchers that you're interested in. If they don't reply, it's not the end of the world. Reach out to a few others, and hopefully you will find someone who can help you through all of this process. But having said that, you shouldn't be scared to submit your work independently. So I think one of the papers that I mentioned before, which I wrote with my friend, we'd written that commentary together. I think it cost a couple of £1,000 to publish, but what actually happened is that you then submit this article to the universities, or you submitted it to King's, and they offered essentially an open scholarship where they paid for you to submit your work and get it published. So yes, a lot of you seem shocked by the fact you pay to get your research published. That is generally how it works. So yeah, that paper was in an open access journal, BMJ Global Health. it would have cost, I think, around £1,500 to £2,000. But the university kindly covered the cost of that. So, and most universities do have programs like that to help you publish whilst you're at medical school, or have some funds available, essentially. General rule of thumb is you shouldn't, if you've written an article that you think is going to change the world, you don't submit it really to one journal, more than one journal at a time. It's pretty bad kind of research etiquette. You kind of submit it to one, wait for an acceptance or a rejection, and you submit to the next, etc., etc. Always stick to deadlines. This is whether you're kind of researching by yourself or with friends, but particularly when you are researching with a mentor. So Prof Ma, you know, he's a fantastic mentor, but like any eminent researcher, has deadlines that need to be adhered to. So if you've been given the opportunity to work with a researcher or a mentor, then make sure you stick to those deadlines, because that's what will keep you in the loop and will keep you getting papers sent to you to be written as well. Patience, as I said, you know, it can take months, sometimes years for your papers to be published. Some are quicker than others, but you know, be patient, and you'll be in good stead. So if you look at the right over here, this is linked to that patience point. This is an example. If you guys haven't written any papers yet, what normally happens is when you submit a paper, whether it's a narrative review, systematic review, primary research, you get comments sent back to you. So the reviewers will send you comments, and you have to respond to every single one of those comments until those, you know, points have been met. They then may send you back another set of comments, and you have to respond to all of those. They may send you back another set, and you respond to all of those before the paper gets published. So it's an arduous process, but one that's very, very worthwhile. Letters to the editor often don't have this long process. And hopefully if you write a reasonable review, this whole, or primary research, this whole process shouldn't take too long. Now, here's a really interesting point, which I think a lot of people probably aren't aware of. And I think it's probably very, very interesting, is this last point. Check nice. So a big question is always asked, how do I figure out what I should even write my review about? How should I figure out what I should write my audit about? Which is a very, very understandable question. Obviously, having a mentor is brilliant, but also it's a little trick on nice. Some of you may have seen this already, some of you may not, but I've used this as an example. So if you're interested in hematology or kind of venous thromboembolic disease in general, a little tab here called recommendations for research. I can't include the whole page here, but you scroll down and it will give you a bunch of research ideas with essentially specific titles that they want people to write about. I mean, that sounds pretty useful to me. I've never done that personally. I think mainly because this whole nice structure didn't really exist when I was at medical school. But yeah, I mean, I think that will really, really help you guys out. And if I was in your position, I would definitely take a look at that as well. So yeah, check nice and have a look at their recommendations for research. Okay, what's this? Let's have a look. No, we're not doing that yet. So let me introduce Professor Ma properly now. Let me bring him up. Give me 1 second. There he is. Okay, Prof.
Yeah, I'm here now.
Okay, brilliant.
I'm here now, yeah.
Can everyone see Prof? Yeah.
Probably
okay,
my face a little bit dark because I was sitting in my dining room. It's too hot now.
It's too hot. Yeah, no
but
worries.
Here should be fine. Yeah.
Wherever you feel comfortable, Prof. Let me introduce you properly to everyone. I don't think I really did you justice before. So everyone, this is Prof Ma. As I said, he is a professor of anesthesia, an incredibly humble and incredibly clever man who I met during my intercalated BSc. He has essentially helped me write almost every single one of the 20-odd papers that I've managed to write. And as you guys are saying, everyone really needs a Prof Ma in their life. They'll essentially, without Prof, I wouldn't have got the academic foundation program. I wouldn't have managed to work in London for 2 years, and a lot of this process wouldn't have happened at all without his help. He's essentially taught me everything I know. When I met him, I had 0 publications and no background in research, and he has helped me along this entire process. So obviously we're so grateful to have him here today. He is involved in some incredible research in anesthesia and surgery. As you can see, he's the head of the anesthesia research department at Imperial College, an incredibly talented man, and also just a kind of a testament to how open and supportive he is of medical students and really any student at university. I've actually, having written a few papers for Prof Ma, I asked whether he could help out a few of my friends at medical school. And I think maybe 3 or 4 of my friends, he has got them their first ever 2 or 3 publications. So really, he's an incredibly supportive mentor, and he's here to help you guys out. We've given you his email address on the last slide, so please email him, but please don't spam him. So thank you so much for joining us today, Prof. We're all very grateful to have you.
Thank you, Dr. Azim. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. So let's move on to the Q&A. Here we go. Okay, let's see. Hopefully this works pretty well. So the Q&A, how it's going to work is you pop your questions up here. If you could then specify whether, if you have really any idea, whether you'd like Prof to answer them or for me to answer them, then let us know. But Prof, I can leave this first one to you if you'd like. How would you recommend performing a literature review?
Yes, good question. Okay, again, first, thank you to give me this opportunity to see so many people, so many audience. I believe more than 400
More
now.
than 400, yes.
Yeah, I believe you guys are from all over the world.
All over the world.
Yeah, I can see. Okay, so the question, how is really a lot that easy to answer. So, but let me talk about a little bit other things, and then I move to answer this question.
Okay.
So my understanding is here. Okay. Really, Dr. Azim and I, we are very lucky, know each other a few years ago and working together for many years now. So it's really, we're working as a team with other fellows, other students working, work together as a team. So really, for research publication, is really a teamwork. So that's the first point I want to make. Second point I want to make is we need, any publications. It's not that easy. Publish a paper not that easy. I must emphasize that, because publication equals to public. So anything you publish, all the people in the world read your papers. So really, we have a responsibility. We have to make sure the science integrity is there and scientifically, is correct. So that's, we need a lot of efforts to check, to read for example, for review, to read a lot of papers. Each reviews, although we publish majority of them is narrative reviews, but each review we read more than 100 papers, almost in biology 150, or more, even more than 200 papers.
Yeah.
So think about this, is really hard work.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because
yeah. So this, if any of you want to publish a paper, no matter what kind of piece of paper, even a letter to editor, you have to read much more than you needed. For example, letter to editor, probably you only to allow to list about up to 10 publications, but probably you have to read more than 30 papers. You have to know this, that, this corner, that corner, and then to grab knowledge together and then make a story. So the hard work is essential. Now, publication is a publication, but as a doctor, as a future doctor, well, we have to have you know, self motivation. Without a motivation, really, you publish one paper, you lost interest, you never publish another paper. So interest and also self motivations is important. So if you have all those, you know, point I make above, you can work with other people, and you can publish a paper or many papers. Now, if I go back to question is how to publish. Let me the question disappear now.
Oh, so, yeah, I think it was how to write a literature review.
Yeah, the literature review. So in terms of literature review, I believe you need a mentor. You need a mentor. Okay, I honestly believe any of you, all of you, is very clever, genius, you know, people in the world. Otherwise, you won't, you know, study medicine anyway. So you are clever. There's no question. Now, the review, you need a person. You need a person is more senior, like me, because we study for many years. We know research, you know, rough directions. Although probably we don't know, you know, detail, but at least we know which areas important. Plus, you know, from my own research experience, I study quite broadly, because anesthesia and mechanism and anesthetics and intensive care and you know, so on and so forth, many, you know, research area, you know, in operative medicine. So I know the area, so I can, you know, give you a question and you can answer the question. Often, you know, initially we work together with as in I give you know, outlines, I give a title and then outlines, and then you know, Dr. Azim read the papers around that the title and then start to draft out the paper. So essentially, for an effective way to write a literature review, you need a mentor or a senior you know, person to help you. That's if you you work together with that senior person, even with other fellows, his any people under his or her group. That would be the best way to start with.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, Prof. So sorry to move you on here, just because we have almost 100 questions. I think we do have 100 questions.
Wow, yes.
So let's move on to the next one, if that's okay. So when a student approaches you, what do you expect them to ask or participate in to ensure that you take them on?
Well, the answer already have. Normally, even sometimes I not interview students. I just make a phone call, have a phone call conversation, and have a emails conversation, communication. I can you know, guide in whether the students is really have a passion or have an interest or have a self motivation. So again, if you have a self motivation, if you are hardworking, you are determined, I believe other people that judge the same will take you on board. I'm sure.
I think that's a very good point, because I remember when I first started working with you, it was like you said, you'd give me a title and then you'd give me a few subheadings and you'd say, we need this done in 1 month or this many weeks. And I think, like you mentioned, just being determined and meeting those deadlines is you know, really, really important. So that's probably the most important thing from what you're saying.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Let's move on to the next one. Does it matter if the publication topic doesn't match the specialty that you want to pursue? What do you think?
Well, for the student, probably it doesn't matter, but for me, it is a matter. It is a matter because otherwise, if, for example, I'm studying para-operating medicine, if you want to write, for example, virology, for example, this virus, pandemic virus, because I'm not studying that. But in fact, we just submit a paper, a review paper, talk about virus cause systemic inflammation and cause multi-organ failure, multi-organ dysfunction. So if, for example, again, has to have align with my research area. You may argue, where's your research area? As Dr. Azim mentioned, some publications. In fact, for example, I'm doing cancer. I'm doing intensive care. That's why more organ failure and plus others. So all the research here, publications align with my research areas. If too, far away from my research area, I won't do that because I don't have enough scientific knowledge to judge whether this paper can be good or can be bad, can be published or cannot be published.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think what's really interesting about your department, Prof, is that you're surgery and anesthesia, but you actually within that cover so many different specialties, like we said, renal, neurology, pediatrics. You're very, very varied in what you do, which is great. And I mean, in terms of the question, I'd probably agree is that from the interviews that I had for AFP, etc., they're looking for you to know that you have a research mind and that you're able to review papers, you're able to conduct systematic reviews, etc., rather than being 100% certain that what specialty you want to go into. So when you apply for CST, they don't specify, or core medical training or core surgical training, they won't specify that they want papers necessarily in that particular area, but they want to know that you can make robust, scientifically sound papers. So yes, I would agree with Prof in that in the initial stages, it probably doesn't really matter. Great, thank you, Prof. Let's move on to the next one. Would you prefer the student met you in person before emailing for a research project? What do you think?
No, not necessarily, because I, understand very well. For example, in London, well, in any major city in the world, you move from point A to point B, cost you almost half day or 1 day. So it's not a good idea, to ask students, any person to come in to meet together for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or up to half hour. It's not that essential for me. Normally, we for example, I receive email and I reply very simply. I normally don't give too long email because personally I don't want to read too long emails. That's why I reply normally very simple, 1 or 2 sentences. And then we know each other and we can make a phone call. Not this easy. For example, use Zoom, use Teams can make conversation. So do not need in person to discuss because it's not that essential to me.
Okay, great. I mean, I would say Prof is famous for his very concise email replies. I think anything more than 5 words is probably a bit too many words. And also, I think Prof, you haven't met Zach, have you yet?
We haven't. In fact, we often email each other, but we haven't, see each other. Definitely.
Okay. So Zach, as I'm sure you guys know, is a team member in biomedicine. He has written a bunch of papers with Prof as well, and they have never met. So I think that probably answers your question as well. Great, thank you, Prof. Let's move on to the next one. How do you find the best journal to submit your work to?
To answer this question, I believe the best, person is the first author. Is if you write a paper, this work match to where which journal is best match to possibly publish. However, I normally judge whether our paper can publish in what sort of kind of journals. I just judge from the reference list. So, for example, if you are read up a paper, all the references refer to Nature publication, definitely our work were published in Nature. If, for example, review, let's talk about review, or all reference you use, for example, BMJ, very likely the BMJ will take it. The reason is not because of BMJ, you refer to our lot of publications, we take it, not that way. It's because your paper, the quality probably equal to any papers published in BMJ.
Okay, great. Thank you, Prof. Okay. How can you write an audit from home? Do you write many audits, Prof, still?
No, well, to me, because we are highly academic, so audit to me is a good piece of work for clinical practice, but scientifically, is not that great, not that high. So where you can, why not? As long as you got the data from anywhere, you can read up.
Yeah. I mean, I'd agree. I think I've written a few audits and quality improvement projects, some of which are reasonably okay, some of which are horrific. I think the main issue is going to be the data collection. So a lot of this data is going to be under, the Data Protection Act. It's going to be it has to often be opened within trust computers. As long as you can have access to that data at home, normally under a password protected Excel spreadsheet or something like that, if you have access to the data, you have no problem with doing it. So you would just need to contact the governance lead within the department that you're trying to get the data from. If they allow you to use it at home, then like Prof said, that there shouldn't be a problem. Best place to publish a medical journal. Okay, I think that probably means what are the best free medical journals where you can publish? Any ideas?
Best place to publish a medical journal for free. Wow. No, this probably the answer is no now, because now government really pushing for open access. Any paper you want to publish, it's better publish it for open access. But there's still a lot of journals, they are not charged anything. You can publish your paper there. Definitely you in fact nowadays probably still more journals than open access journals are still available for free publish.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good. And I think like was mentioned before, if you are going for open access journal, the fees can be in the thousands, but a lot of universities will have funds or open access scholarships available for you to help you with that and essentially cover all of your costs. Okay, good question. Okay, Prof, how do I approach a mentor, especially if I'm not their student or have not met them? I think you've probably answered that before in terms of Prof would be pretty happy by the sounds of it if he received an email rather than having to meet them in person.
Yeah, you don't need a network or channel. In fact, you have I have a student email me, said I read your paper. I want to have some attachment or laboratory observation. I just email back and say welcome. As long as you have your parents agree, your teachers agree, you have a kind of insurance, or at least your parents agree. Okay, my daughter, my son can go to your place. There's no reliability issues. That's fine.
Yeah, great, great. Thank you. Prof Ma, why do you help medical students? Just to understand your perspective and to show unhelpful ones why they should. Okay, so yeah, Prof, why do you help medical students and so many professors may not help medical students?
I don't know other people, but I can open my mind to talk about myself. Okay, so I can't remember whether I told you Dr. Azim or not. for me, I'm a teacher, I'm a university supervisor, I'm a university professor. My job is teaching medical students. So you may just, thinking of teaching, just give a lectures, not much more than that. Give lectures, tutorials, laboratory supervision, and help them to write up an essay or write a paper for publish. So what my philosophy is, in this position, I want any student who working with me to achieve their maximal potentials. So in fact, over the nearly 20 years now, I supervise reaching more than 50 BSc students. Only one student no publication. The reason why no publication, because these students not determined, doesn't care publication. So if he doesn't care, why I care? But any student working with me, if she or he want a publication, I will use any efforts to help her or help him to publish.
Brilliant. There you go. I think you, like everyone said, you just need a Prof Ma in your life. There are going to be thousands roaming around. They're like Pokemon, right? You'll find them. Okay, Azim, how did you go about finding a topic and publishing your first paper? Like I said, when I met Prof, so when I was at Imperial for my BSc, I didn't have any papers. I think the first topic I did was with Prof, with one of his other doctors, PhD doctors, I think, who was writing a topic on, I think it was brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which I definitely never heard of before. I think they'd made a start on it, and Prof mentioned a few topics or few subheadings that needed filling. So I just read a lot of the written literature and wrote and filled out those subheadings, basically. That's how I went about publishing my first paper. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's much easier when you have a mentor to help you out with that whole process. It's possible, but a little bit trickier if you do it independently. But I know tons of friends, academic foundation program trainees, etc. Like I said, Dr. Miller, who I mentioned on a few slides before, I think he's published over 20 papers. The vast majority he's done independently. So these are freedom of information requests, letters to the editor, commentaries, etc. So yeah, definitely possible to do it yourself as well. There are less fortunate people who aren't able to find a mentor. What should they do? Prof, what do you think? If you're not able to find a mentor, can you still publish?
Well, I thought medical school, I don't know other, at least, Oxbridge, Imperial, we do have a mentor for the undergraduate student, even PhD students. Or those mentors can give some help. If he or she cannot help, at least because those people are always a senior, always working in the uni for many years. He or she know other people, always can introduce to you. For example, I can give you one example. Whenever I'm our BSc student, I not study our pathway, it's other pathway. And he approached to the course administrator, say, I want to study anesthesia, but unfortunately I wasn't choose for the anesthesia pathway. And then he even say, I want to study in United States. And that's administrator forward the email to me. And I introduced him to Stanford, because I knew a very good professor in anesthesia in Stanford. He did a half a year study in Stanford, came back, become a trainee anesthetist. Now he found a job in New York. Now he's a anesthetist in New York now. So this, how you can see how this works. Is again, Dr. Azim already mentioned letter work. Network, for example, you don't have a network, but a network means, is digging from an open point, and you will open the network.
Yeah, great, thank you. That's really, really useful. I guess from my point of view, I kind of answered it on the previous question. You don't need a mentor to do freedom of information requests. You don't need a mentor necessarily to do an audit. You don't need a mentor necessarily to do a letter to the editor. And if you look up Dr. George Miller's papers, like I said, he's got over 20 papers, the vast majority of which he's done without any mentor whatsoever. So look at those alternatives, go on NICE, look at their recommendations for research, and often you should be able to hit some of those criteria. So having a mentor like Prof is brilliant, but it's definitely possible to do it without as well. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah.
I think we've answered this. Do we need a supervisor in every publication? Ideally, yes, but not necessarily. Do letters to the editor have to be a response to a paper? How strong do your criticisms have to be, and rough ideas on how to criticize them? Prof, do you have any advice on letters to the editor?
Yeah, the letter to editor is relatively easy to publish, but not always the case. For example, we publish a few. Student one publish, I help them, but we do have a letter editor, for example, to Lancet. They turn down, they don't want to publish. But in general, letter to editor is easy to write up, easy to publish, for sure. But of course, letter to editor, you have to give very positive comments to that paper. But because letter to editor, the other, the paper, the authors of that paper, they were answer back, they were read back. If you read, you are give very negative to their paper, they fed up, they not answer back. Of course, the journal won't publish your letter to editor because they can't. The other side, they won't answer this letter. You can't publish. So you have to give very positive comments to that paper. Of course, you have to give critique. Any paper is only answer small question, only not the big question. There are a lot of things you can talk about. You can make what's the limitations of that publication. So again, in general, you have to be positive, but you have to use a positive way to give some critiques. Any research question, more research question to be studied in future.
Great, I think that's a great answer. Constructive criticism, I guess, is what you want to give. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Prof. I guess just have a read of some letters to the editor. I gave a few examples in the slides, and you'll see, like, be positive, but also find ways to critique in a positive way. What kind of journals are good to submit to as an undergraduate? Any ideas, Prof? I'm happy to answer. I'm not sure if you know about any undergraduate.
That's no such, but we do have as undergraduate medical journals, of course you can publish there. But there's no, any journal they didn't say, okay, you are undergrad, you can't publish there. Any journals, any piece of work you can publish anywhere. There's no such, you only can publish certain journals. Any journal you can publish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a few which lean more towards kind of medical students, but like Prof said, really you can publish anywhere. I think clinical teacher is one of them. There's a couple on this slide about letters to the editor examples there, which often undergraduates will submit to, but it's not purely for undergraduates. Okay, Prof, this one's for you. When you have 50 authors or like 10 authors, how do you decide on who is first author, second author in a research group?
Yeah, the first author really is who contribute much more. So in general, okay, a publication, the first author and last author take more responsibilities. So the first work is normally is driver, driven this project to finish and then write up as a paper. The last author, of course, nowadays our last author take a responsibility as well, because the last author take a credit. So you can see the last author, the two burdens. One is credit is cushion, but if anything goes wrong, the last author is corresponding author A has to take responsibility. So again, the first author, is the idea probably from the last author, but the major task being finished by first author.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people might not necessarily know is that if you see a last author, it doesn't mean they've done the least work. Often the last author is going to be the supervisor who's come up with the idea and given that task to the first author to carry out, and then they've sandwiched all the other authors in between. So yeah, just remember that when you're reading papers, the last author is often very, very important. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Yeah. Okay, Prof, what qualities in a student do you look for before taking them on as a mentee? I think you've probably touched on this before, but anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, let me briefly, I believe, in my philosophy, of course, all the students here, all audience here is, are clever, very clever. But I judge a person is really the attitude. Really, you are really determined or not. If you just, okay, I want to publish, you just say I want to publish. You don't want to, head down to study hard, to working hard. That means, if just a few emails, communications, I just fed up. I just not bother anymore. So as Dr. Aziz already mentioned, because I often give deadlines, because deadlines, I know it's quite bad. Deadlines is pressure, but again, without pressure, we can't move forward. So if I give deadlines, if a student cannot meet, even no reasonable reasons, a few times, I just fed up. I just not bother anymore. So remember, if any person you're working with give you deadline, you better meet the deadlines, because that's reflect your determination.
Great, really good point. Stick to your deadlines, be determined. Thank you, Prof. So I know we have 154 questions. Obviously, we're not going to get through them all. I think we'll try and take 5 more. So if you guys make sure you upvote each other's comments, so the most important ones come to the top, that's okay. Okay, so Prof, do you get offended when someone is honest about why they are approaching you for help, i.e. they just want points for their portfolio?
No. I for example, I have a student I teach in BSc, but I never remember. After graduate, they found that there's no publication. They cannot tick in any application form. They say, "Oh, I'm your student. I want to have a publication for my job hunting." I said, "Why not? We can work in together." That's for sure, because the student is student, okay? Because you have to start to climb to academic ladder. We understand that. We understand that. So I do help. You tell me, okay, I want a publication because for my job application, that's fine, as long as the work you carry out is high quality. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, great. So you appreciate the honesty. That's
yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Prof. Okay, a few more. How do you select an appropriate paper to reply to with a letter to the editor? Any advice at all?
Well, I don't know others. At least we just publish a letter to editor in Lancet, because that's our research or my research area. I read that paper. I think that's quite interesting. And I have a fellow from Japan. He want to publish a paper. I said, why not? Let us read together. And then because that's my research area, I know, good thing, what's the bad thing, in that paper, and we work together and quickly get it published. So again, you have to have some certain knowledge in that area. Otherwise, you cannot get into inside and get what I often talking about paper. You notice the bone is a meat. It's you have to have meat there. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. I guess kind of linked on to that point is that, like Prof said, you genuinely need some experience in the area that you're writing if you're writing a letter to the editor, and that's why a lot of these journals, like Clinical Teacher, for example, which are more focused towards, a little bit more focused towards undergraduates, will really appreciate your opinion as a medical student. So have a look at them, and have a look at the letters to the editor slide for a couple of examples of some good journals for you. Okay, we'll do two more just to finish off. Okay, so what are the first steps? I feel like we've answered a lot on letters to the editor, so we'll leave that one if that's okay. Okay, Prof, how long does it take to write a publication roughly?
Well, that's a difficult question. I believe depend on because we're all busy with other things. Depend on for example, you got exams. Where you have to finish your exam first. In general, a publication for narrative review, you need up to 6 months, because you need a few weeks to get an idea together and start to read. For example, in our case, I give outline, and from outline you read more. In general, you have to have read more than 50 papers, and then you more or less know something in this area, and then start to wrap up. So normally you need at least 3 to 6 months.
Okay, great. So that's a general guide then. 3 to 6 months. Sounds like a good plan. Okay, we'll take one last question. How do I find the team? We realized that the publications you showed had multiple authors. I guess, Prof, I mean, I think you mentioned this before, the last author is going to be your supervisor and the first author is going to be the first author.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that in terms of contacting? Would you recommend the last author?
Yeah, normally you should contact with the last author. Last author, you can find email contact information from the publication. So read to last author. Well, one suggestion I would give, because nowadays you can check PubMed very easily. So if you check the last author, you will see how often this author or how often his group or her group publish. But if an author, because the senior author normally, at least in UK, the university should have a research group. If research group each year publish, let's say, only 1 paper, 2 papers, those kind of probably author probably not worth to contact them, because to me, I could be wrong, but to me, this group is not very productive. Often you send email to them, you won't get an answer, because in UK, I don't know other countries, in UK definitely in the university above a lecture, because the last author, either lecturer, senior lecturer, reader, or professor, they have a group. Their group, they have working together. They should have more than 1 publication rather than 1 publication or 2 publications. Okay. In general, you need find a group they are more productive. Those groups you should work with.
Great. So it sounds like 2 rules there.
But that's my own opinion.
Yeah. So contact the last author and contact collaborations or groups which have a high output. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll call it a day there. I'm sorry we couldn't get through 150 questions. But Prof, thank you so much for your time. There's Prof again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
It was absolutely amazing to have you on. Thank you so much for all of your knowledge, and hopefully we'll have you on for another one sometime.
All right.
So just a couple of household things. Thank you, Prof, once again. Housekeeping things for everyone. Please fill out the feedback form, which hopefully someone will be posting in the chat, one of our team. Here is Prof's golden email address. I mean, oops, there you go. As I said, Prof, as you can tell, is incredibly supportive for junior doctors, well, medical students, junior doctors, etc. I'm sure he will be receiving hundreds of emails after this, and he will try to reply to as many as he possibly can.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. I will answer your email. If I'm not answer, send her again. Probably your email went to my bin.
Yeah, into the spam. Yeah. So if there's no response in a few weeks, I guess try an email again.